The air on the island is thick, heavy. You can almost taste the salt and the tension, a coppery tang on the tongue like blood not yet spilled. Ganyujima. A strip of sand and rock caught between two worlds, a place that means nothing, and in a few moments will mean everything. The sun is a hammer, beating down on the shore, and standing there, a figure of impossible perfection against the glare, is Sasaki Kojiro. They call him the Demon of the West, and you can see why. He isn't just a man, he's an ideal. His clothes are immaculate, his posture flawless, an artist waiting for the curtain to rise. And the sword at his side, my God, the sword. It's a nodachi, a field sword, but longer, impossibly long. They call it the drying pole, a name that sounds almost mundane until you realize it's a weapon so long, so perfectly balanced, that no normal man could even draw it, let alone wield it. But Kojiro isn't a normal man. He is the pinnacle of the art. His blade gleams, a sliver of captured moonlight even under the brutal sun, humming with a deadly purpose. But he's been waiting, and waiting. The agreed-upon hour has come and gone. The officials are sweating, their formal robes turning into personal saunas. The onlookers, the powerful men who arrange this spectacle, they're shifting, muttering. Has Musashi fled? Did the wild animal from Mimasaka, the unkempt Ronin, with more than 60 victories to his name, finally meet a reputation that made his blood run cold? Kojiro's face, a mask of serene confidence just an hour ago, is starting to crack. A muscle twitches in his jaw. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's an insult. A calculated piece of psychological warfare. He is Sasaki Kojiro, the darling of the Hosokawa clan, the greatest swordsman of his generation. He does not wait for unwashed vagabonds. The mockery is palpable, the whispers carrying on the wind. Maybe the stories were just that. Stories. Maybe the monster of Kyoto was just a man after all. A coward. And just as that thought begins to crystallize, just as the officials begin discussing the logistics of declaring a forfeiture, a victory by default that would feel utterly hollow, a shape appears on the horizon, a dark speck against the blinding shimmer of the sea. But it's not right. It's not the grand vessel you'd expect for a warrior of Musashi's fame. It's small, pathetic even. It's a simple fishing boat, worn and battered by the waves, propelled by a single, grizzled fisherman. It's not just late. It's defiantly, arrogantly, unbelievably crude. And in the stern, a lone figure is hunched over, seemingly oblivious to the history that awaits him, a dragon in the guise of a beggar, finally coming to shore. To understand the monster, you have to understand the world that spawned him. You have to rewind. Go back to a Japan that's nothing like the serene, tranquil image you have in your head. This isn't the land of cherry blossoms and tea ceremonies. Not yet. This is the bloody hangover at the end of the Sengoku Jidai, the age of the country at war. 100 years of non-stop, brutal, grinding civil war. Think of it like this. Imagine every state in America was its own country, each with its own warlord, each constantly trying to murder its neighbors and steal their land. For a century, the ground is soaked in blood, the social order is shattered, and the only thing that matters, the only real law, is the law of the sharpest edge. This is the crucible. The chaos of unification under the new Tokugawa shogunate is just beginning, but it's a piece held together by paranoia and naked force. It's a world teeming with ambitious warlords, disgraced generals, and thousands upon thousands of masterless swordsmen, ronin, all desperate, all hungry, all armed to the teeth. And in a world like this, what's the only real currency? It isn't gold. It isn't land. It's skill. Raw, lethal, undeniable martial skill. A sword wasn't just a weapon. It was your resume, your business card, your social security number, and your life insurance policy all rolled into one. Your ability to cut another man down was your only path to a steady meal, to a roof over your head, to the respect of your peers. A lord might hire you based on the reputation of your blade alone. You could go from being a penniless wanderer to a respected retainer in the space of a single, perfectly executed sword stroke. But the reverse was also true. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, one opponent who was just a fraction of a second faster than you, and you were just another corpse bloating in a ditch, your precious sword in the hands of a better man. The pressure was immense. Every single day was a job interview where failing meant you died. Can you even imagine that? Living every moment knowing that your entire existence could be snuffed out by the next stranger you meet on the road. Now the warriors who navigated this meat grinder, they had a code, a set of ideals. We call it Bushido, the way of the warrior. But don't think of the romanticized, philosophical version that came later, in times of peace. This was a practical code for killers. It was about loyalty to your lord, first and foremost. It was about courage in the face of death. It was about discipline, about mastering the forms and techniques of your chosen school, your ryu. The ideal samurai was a pillar of a brutal social order. He was predictable. He was reliable. His sword strokes were practiced. His etiquette was proper. His loyalty was absolute. He was a finely crafted cog in a machine of war. And it is against this backdrop, against this ideal of the disciplined, loyal warrior, that our subject, this force of nature, is going to explode. He will not just bend the rules of Bushido, he will take a torch to the entire rulebook. And where does a storm like this begin? It begins, as it so often does, with a father. Or maybe the shadow of a father. Musashi's parentage is complicated, a mystery wrapped in local legend. The man widely believed to be his father was one Shinmen Munisai, and Munisai was no slouch. He was a famous swordsman in his own right, a master of the sword and the jeet, a specialized weapon for disarming opponents. He was respected. He was established. He even served the local lord, so you'd think his son would have a path, right, an entry into this world of martial honor. But that's not what happened. The stories say Musashi, or Benosuke as he was called then, was not raised by his father. He was an outcast. Perhaps his mother died in childbirth. Perhaps he was simply abandoned, cast aside for being too wild. Imagine that. Your father is a renowned warrior, a pillar of the community, and you are the feral child, living on the fringes, looking in. What does that do to a boy? It plants a seed. A hard, bitter seed of resentment, and a burning, all-consuming need to prove yourself. Not just to be good, not just to be great, but to be so undeniably supreme that the entire world, and the ghost of the father who rejected you, could not help but take notice. So you have this boy, Benosuke, growing up in Miyamoto province, and the legends paint a picture of a child who was less a boy and more a force of nature, uncouth, ill-tempered, covered in rashes and dirt. He was big for his age, unnaturally strong, and possessed a violent temper that terrified the local villagers. He wasn't playing games with the other children. He was roaming the mountains. He was a creature of the wilderness. This wasn't some disciplined prodigy in a spotless dojo. This was a feral child, a human wolf cub, learning the world not through the polite filter of society, but through the raw, unfiltered lens of survival. He was everything a proper samurai family would be ashamed of. And his training? Forget it. Forget the polished floors, the kneeling students, the sensei correcting the angle of an elbow. Musashi's dojo was the forest. His teachers were the animals. He didn't learn swordsmanship by memorizing kata. He learned about timing by watching a hawk dive on a sparrow. He learned about footwork by watching a cat stalk its prey. He learned about relentless aggression from a wild boar charging through the undergrowth. This is a fundamental break from every tradition of the time. While other young warriors were learning the accepted, correct way to fight, the theories, the philosophies, the forms, Musashi was learning the brutal, practical reality of combat from nature itself. He was learning what works, not what's honorable, not what's beautiful. What works? It's a completely different operating system. It's the difference between a classical musician who can perfectly replicate a piece of music and a jazz improviser who feels the rhythm of the universe and creates something raw and new in the moment. And this raw, untamed force is about to collide with the established world. The scene is a local temple. A traveling samurai, a man named Arima Kihei, is passing through. He's a practitioner of the famous Kashima Shinto-ryu school of swordsmanship, and he does what warriors do to build their reputation. He posts a public challenge, a sign basically saying, "I am here and I am the best." Anyone who disagrees, step forward. It's a bold move, a claim of superiority. And who answers this challenge from a seasoned professional killer? Not another wandering swordsman. Not a local champion. A boy. A 13-year-old boy. Benosuke. Imagine the scene. The disbelief. The outright laughter. This dirty, wild-looking teenager, armed with nothing but a wooden staff, a bow, challenging a man who has dedicated his life to the art of the sword. The monks probably tried to shoo him away. Kihei must have seen it as either an insult or a joke. But the boy was serious. What happens next is not a duel. It's an assassination. It's the moment the demon is born. Arima Kihei, confident, probably annoyed, faces this boy. He draws his blade, a beautiful, deadly piece of steel. He expects a certain rhythm, a certain protocol. He expects a fight. He doesn't get one. Musashi, Benosuke, doesn't adhere to the script. He doesn't bow properly. He doesn't wait for the formal start. He just attacks. But not with his weapon. With his mind. He screams, he taunts. He's a whirlwind of feral energy. And in the moment of Kihei's confusion, that fatal half-second of, "What is happening?" Musashi explodes forward. He doesn't elegantly block the sword. He rushes the man. He closes the distance, gets inside the blade's killing arc, and then it's pure, savage brutality. He grabs the grown samurai, lifts him, and throws him bodily to the ground. And before Kihei can even comprehend the sheer violation of the rules, the boy is on top of him, bringing the 6-foot wooden staff down. Again, and again, and again. Not with technique, with rage. Beating a trained, armed samurai to death with a stick. In front of everyone. Think about that. At 13 years old, to not just kill, but to dominate and destroy a man in such a primal, horrific way. It doesn't just earn you a victory. It carves something out of your soul. It's the first entry in a ledger that will soon be filled with the names of the dead. It's first blood. And it is the terrifying, bloody dawn of the man who will become Miyamoto Musashi. That brutal display at 13, it was just the prologue, a shocking opening act. To truly forge the legend, the world had to throw its absolute worst at him. And in the year 1600, the absolute worst had a name. Sekigahara. This wasn't a duel. This was an apocalypse. The single bloodiest, most decisive battle in the entire violent history of samurai Japan. Over 160,000 men gathered in a valley, a sea of steel and ambition, to decide the fate of the nation in a single day. And somewhere in that screaming, muddy, bloody chaos was a teenager named Miyamoto Musashi, or Shinmen Musashi, as he likely was then, fighting for the losing side. Imagine it. The roar of thousands of men, a sound that isn't human, a physical pressure wave that hits you in the chest, the thunder of cavalry charges, the crack of primitive firearms, the endless, percussive rhythm of sword-striking sword, sword-striking bone. He wasn't a hero commanding the field. He was a nameless grunt in the infantry, a single drop of water in a tidal wave of death, fighting for the Western army of Ishida Mitsunari against the eastern forces of the future shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu. This wasn't about elegant technique. This was about survival, a lesson in the brutal mathematics of war, where your individual skill means almost nothing against a cavalry charge or a volley of musket fire. And then came the aftermath. His side didn't just lose, they were annihilated. The battle turned into a rout, the rout into a massacre. The victorious Eastern Army, the Tokugawa forces, were not in a forgiving mood. This was the end of a century of war, and they were determined to salt the earth so no new rebellion could ever grow. What followed was a purge. A nationwide hunt for the survivors of the Western Army. Imagine the fields after the battle, 30,000 corpses rotting in the autumn sun. The local villagers paid to collect the heads of enemy samurai. The gruesome head-viewing ceremonies, where the victorious generals would sit on stools and inspect the severed, tagged heads of their fallen enemies. This is the world Musashi, wounded and defeated, was thrown into. It's a lesson that would be burned into his soul. Victory is everything. There is no honor in a beautiful death. There is only the grim reality of survival. So now he's a fugitive, a ghost. His name is on a list of defeated warriors. He's being actively hunted by patrols, the Ochigari, the fallen warrior hunters. Every shadow could hold an enemy. Every friendly-looking farmer could be an informant ready to sell him out for a handful of coins. This is the absolute nadir. He is wounded, he is starving, he is alone. The grand cause he fought for is ashes. His comrades are dead or scattered. His life is reduced to its most primal element. Do not get caught. He is no longer a proud soldier. He is prey, hiding in caves, foraging in forests, moving only at night. What does that kind of existence do to a man? It strips away everything but the essential core. It makes you paranoid. It makes you hyper-aware. And it teaches you, in a way no dojo ever could, the absolute necessity of self-reliance. There is no one coming to save you. There is no army to back you up. There is only you, your wits, and the piece of steel at your side. And from these ashes, a new identity is born. He survives the hunt. He emerges from the shadows. But he can't go back. He has no lord. He has no home. He has no rank. He is now officially a ronin, a wave man, a masterless wanderer, adrift on the currents of a newly forged nation that sees him as a threat, a remnant of a bygone era. For many, this was a curse, a life of banditry or begging. But for Musashi, you have to wonder, was it also a kind of liberation? He was now completely untethered, free from the obligations of loyalty, free from the rigid hierarchy of the samurai class, free from the dogma of any single martial arts school. His life was a blank page, and his sword was the pen. He was responsible for his own destiny in the most absolute sense imaginable. The world had tried to crush him, and it had failed. Now he would make the world his dojo. This is the beginning of his Mushashugyo, the warrior's pilgrimage. It's a conscious choice. He doesn't look for a new lord to serve. He doesn't try to settle down. He dedicates his entire existence to a single obsessive goal: to perfect the art of combat by seeking out and defeating the most famous masters in the land. This is not random wandering. This is a targeted, brutal, and incredibly dangerous form of postgraduate education. He is, in essence, a researcher, and his field of study is violence. He travels from one end of Japan to the other, not as a tourist, but as a predator, hunting for knowledge, testing his theories in the only laboratory that mattered, the life-or-death duel. His first major stop on this bloody tour is Nara, the home of the Hozoan Temple. The monks here aren't just chanting sutras. They are the undisputed masters of the spear, specifically the Kama-yari, a terrifying cross-shaped spear designed to trap, parry, and kill. Their leader, Hozoan Ine, is a living legend. And into this den of spear masters walks Musashi, the swordsman. It's a classic problem of martial arts. How does the shorter weapon defeat the longer one? He fights them. Not just once. The accounts say he had at least 2 duels with the Hozoan masters. Imagine the scene. The quiet temple courtyard, the silent monks watching as this wild ronin faces their champion. The spear has reach, it has leverage, but the sword has speed and versatility up close. Musashi has to find a way to bridge that gap, to get past the lethal point of the spear. He learns, he adapts, and he wins. He proves that his understanding of combat is not limited to sword-on-sword encounters. He can solve any martial problem presented to him. And from there, the challenges only get stranger. In Edo, the new military capital, he comes up against a man named Shishido Baiken. And Baiken doesn't use a sword, he doesn't use a spear. He wields the kusarigama. Think about that. It's a farmer's sickle attached to a long chain with a heavy iron weight at the end. It is one of the most unpredictable, rule-breaking weapons ever invented. The chain can be swung to keep an opponent at a distance. It can entangle their sword or their limbs. The weight can strike like a meteor. And just when you think you've dealt with all that, the sickle is there to slice your throat. How do you even begin to fight something like that? It's a tactical nightmare. A conventional swordsman would be helpless. But Musashi isn't a conventional swordsman. The legend says he used 2 swords for the first time in this duel, throwing his short sword to knock Baiken off balance before closing in for the kill with his long sword. It's a perfect example of his genius. When the rules don't work, he invents new ones on the spot. This is where his signature style, the Niten Ichiryu, the school of 2 heavens as one, is truly born. It wasn't an abstract philosophical concept he dreamed up in a temple. It was forged out of necessity. Why fight with 1 sword when you have 2? On a chaotic battlefield like Sekigahara, or when facing multiple opponents, or against an unconventional weapon like the kusarigama, having a second blade is a game changer. Think of it in modern terms. A soldier carries a rifle and a pistol. A boxer has a left hand and a right hand. It's just practical. While every other school in Japan was insisting that the long sword, the katana, required two hands for proper power and control, Musashi saw this as a ridiculous limitation. He trained himself to wield the long sword in one hand with the same power, freeing up his other hand for the wakizashi, the short sword. Suddenly, he could attack and defend at the same time. He could parry with one blade and strike with the other. It was an innovation so radical it was seen as uncouth, improper, and terrifyingly effective. But for Musashi, it became more than just a practical advantage. It became a philosophy. The two swords were heaven and earth, the sun and the moon. The long sword, the daieto, and the short sword, the shoto. They represented a harmony of opposites, a complete whole. To rely on only the long sword was to be unbalanced. To understand the way, you had to master both. You had to be fluid, adaptable, able to use every tool at your disposal. It was a direct reflection of his own life. He wasn't just a brute, and he wasn't just a philosopher. He was both. He contained multitudes. His style wasn't just about fighting with two swords. It was about embodying a mindset of complete, holistic mastery, a truth he had learned not from ancient scrolls, but from surviving the crucible of war and walking his own unbeaten path. After years of wandering, of testing himself against the strange and the formidable, Musashi sets his sights on the ultimate prize, the heart of the martial arts establishment, Kyoto. And in Kyoto, one name stood above all others, Yoshioka. The Yoshioka clan weren't just skilled swordsmen, they were an institution. Think of them as the martial equivalent of the British royal family. For generations, they had been the official, hereditary sword instructors to the Ashikaga shoguns. Their style, the Yoshioka Ryu, was the gold standard. It was tradition. It was orthodoxy. It was power. Their dojo in the capital was a symbol of their immense prestige. They were the gatekeepers of martial legitimacy. To be a student of the Yoshioka was to be somebody. And to challenge them? That wasn't just a challenge. It was an act of heresy. And into this refined, aristocratic world of established martial arts walks Miyamoto Musashi. He's not a lord. He's not from a famous school. He's a provincial wanderer, a ronin, whose clothes are worn, whose hair is unkempt, whose reputation smells of the wilderness and fresh blood. He is the living embodiment of everything the polished, urbane samurai of the capital despise. And what does this nobody, this backwoods brawler, do? He issues a formal challenge to the head of the Yoshioka clan himself, Yoshioka Seijuro. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it is breathtaking. It's like a self-taught street fighter showing up at an Olympic training center and demanding a title match against the reigning world champion. The insult is implicit. Your centuries of tradition, your famous name, your powerful connections, they mean nothing to me. Let's see what your sword can actually do. Of course, the Yoshioka were outraged. Insulted, this was beneath them. A pest to be swatted away, they traded insults. They mocked his parentage, his wild appearance, his bizarre two-sword technique. This was all part of the game. Psychological warfare designed to unnerve an opponent before a single sword was drawn. They saw a peasant, an animal. They failed to see the predator. Musashi, for his part, would have absorbed their arrogance, their condescension, and used it as fuel. He knew they underestimated him. He knew they saw him as a simple brute. And he was about to use their pride as a weapon against them. He wasn't just there to win a fight. He was there to tear down their entire house, brick by brick, in front of the whole world. The day of the first duel arrives. The challenger, Musashi, the defender of the faith, Yoshioka Seijuro, master of the clan. The tension is unbearable. And then, Musashi arrives late. Deliberately, a calculated gesture of contempt. Seijuro is fuming. His concentration is broken by rage. This is exactly what Musashi wants. The duel begins. Seijuro, the master of a refined ancient style, moves with grace and precision. Musashi is different. His stance is unconventional. His energy is raw, unpredictable. And then it's over. In a flash, Musashi doesn't kill him. He does something far, far worse. With a single, explosive blow from his wooden sword, he shatters Seijuro's shoulder, causing the great master to drop his ancestral blade in the dirt. It's the ultimate humiliation. In the rigid world of the samurai, being disarmed is a symbolic death. Musashi didn't just defeat him, he invalidated him. He declared, with that one blow, that the head of the great Yoshioka clan wasn't even worth killing. The psychological devastation is absolute. Sejuro is so shamed he is said to have cut off his samurai topknot and retired to a monastery. Act 1 of the tragedy is complete. Now the clan's honor is on the line, and the burden falls to the younger brother Yoshioka Denshichiro. And Denshichiro is not playing games. He is consumed by rage and a desperate need for revenge. There will be no symbolic victory this time. This will be a duel to the death. The second challenge is made, and this time the atmosphere is not one of arrogant confidence, but of grim, murderous intent. The fight is immediate, brutal. Denshichiro attacks with a furious, relentless assault, seeking to overwhelm Musashi with the sheer force of his rage. But fighting with anger is like fighting blind. Musashi, the cold-blooded strategist, weathers the storm. He parries, he evades, he waits for the one, inevitable opening that rage always provides. And when it comes, his strike is lethal. He kills Denshichiro. Decisively. Bloodily, there is no ambiguity this time. The second pillar of the Yoshioka house has fallen. The clan is not just humiliated now, it's crippled. Their two greatest champions, defeated and dead at the hands of a single, nameless Ronin. This is where the story turns dark. The remaining retainers of the Yoshioka clan are backed into a corner. Their pride is shattered, their school is disgraced, their leaders are gone. So they abandon honor. They abandon the warrior's code. They devise a plan born of pure desperation. They name the new, official head of the clan, Matashichiro, Sejuro's son, a child, maybe 10, maybe 12 years old, and they issue a final challenge to Musashi in the boy's name, to take place under a great pine tree at Ichijoji Temple. But it's a lie. It's an ambush. The plan is to lure Musashi into the open, and when he arrives for his duel with a child, the entire remaining force of the Yoshioka school, dozens, perhaps hundreds of swordsmen, archers, and even musketeers, will spring from their hiding places and annihilate him. It is a shameful, cowardly tactic, the last resort of a dying institution. But you cannot trap a force of nature. Musashi's instincts, honed by years of surviving on the road, scream that something is wrong. He breaks his own pattern. He does the one thing they don't expect. He arrives early, hours early. He slips onto the grounds like a ghost, finds a hiding place, and he watches. He watches them arrive, one by one. He sees the archers taking their positions. He sees the swordsmen concealing themselves in the tall grass. He sees the entire dishonorable trap laid bare. The hunters have become the hunted. And then, at the designated hour, as the Yoshioka forces tense in anticipation, Musashi explodes from his cover. But he doesn't charge the hidden soldiers. He goes for the bait. He sprints directly at the boy, Matashichiro, the child heir dressed in formal samurai armor. In a single, horrifying moment, he cuts the boy down. The commander is eliminated. The clan's future is extinguished. The morale of the ambushers shatters into a million pieces. And in that ensuing chaos, Musashi turns. Wielding both his long and short swords, he becomes a whirlwind of death. It is no longer a duel. It is a one-man war. He fights his way through the stunned, enraged, terrified mob of Yoshioka retainers, carving a path of blood and steel out of the trap. He escapes. He actually escapes, leaving behind him the smoking ruins of a legendary clan and the corpse of its child heir. But now Kyoto is no longer safe. He has crossed a line. This wasn't a series of sanctioned duels anymore. This was a massacre. He had publicly and violently wiped a powerful, well-connected family off the map. The authorities would be after him. The full weight of the establishment would come crashing down. His escape from the capital is a frantic, desperate flight, every man's hand now turned against him, the city that was meant to be his crowning achievement now a death trap he had to flee for his life. He may have fled Kyoto, but he left a legend in his wake. A terrifying one. The story spread like wildfire to every castle town, every dojo, every roadside inn. The unkempt Ronin, who, in 3 encounters, single-handedly erased the mighty Yoshioka clan from existence. He didn't just defeat them. He annihilated their past, present, and future. He became a cautionary tale, a boogeyman for arrogant masters. He was no longer just a gifted swordsman on a warrior's pilgrimage. He was the demon of Kyoto, an unstoppable, unpredictable force who didn't play by the rules of men, but by the primal laws of survival and victory. His reputation was now forged in steel and sealed in the blood of an entire lineage. A force like Musashi cannot exist in a vacuum. Nature demands balance. For every unstoppable force, there must be an immovable object. And while Musashi was carving his bloody path through the heart of Japan, a different kind of legend was being forged in the West. A mirror image, a perfect antithesis. His name was Sasaki Kojiro, and they didn't call him a demon out of fear, they called him the demon of the West out of awe. Where Musashi was rough, Kojiro was refined. Where Musashi was a vagabond, Kojiro was a courtier, the handsome and celebrated champion of powerful lords. He was the establishment's hero, the ideal samurai made flesh. He was tall, charismatic, and his skill with the sword was said to be not just masterful, but beautiful. And at his side, he carried a blade as unique as he was, a nodachi so long it was nicknamed the drying pole. A weapon of impossible length and grace, a tool only a master of his caliber could even hope to wield. He was everything Musashi was not. He was the perfect hero destined to slay the monster. And every perfect hero needs a signature move, a piece of martial magic that elevates them to the realm of myth. Kojiro had the Tsubame Gaishi, the swallow cut. Even the name is poetic. It was a technique said to be born from watching swallows dip and weave in flight over a bridge. Think about the physics of it, the sheer genius. A sword is swung downwards in a devastatingly fast cut. But just as the opponent moves to block that attack, the blade, without losing momentum, instantly reverses its trajectory, slicing upwards from below. It's two strikes in the time of one, a feint and a killing blow combined into a single, fluid, inescapable motion. It breaks the fundamental rhythm of combat. How do you defend against it? If you block high, the low cut gets you. If you block low, the high cut has already landed. It was considered a perfect, indefensible technique, a work of art, a puzzle box of death from which there was no escape. It was the physical manifestation of Kojiro's entire philosophy, the pursuit of a single, perfect, polished moment of lethality. And this sets the stage for the ultimate philosophical showdown, the perfect blade versus the uncarved mind. Kojiro's entire approach to combat was the pursuit of refinement. He had found the ultimate technique, the swallow cut, and had polished it, practiced it, perfected it, until it was a flawless diamond of death. His was a system. A beautiful, deadly, predictable system. Musashi had no system. He was the uncarved block of wood of Zen philosophy. He was formless, fluid. He believed that clinging to any one perfect technique was a weakness, a trap. Because for every perfect technique, there is a perfect counter. You just have to find it. Musashi's philosophy was to have no philosophy. To be like water, adapting to the shape of any vessel or any opponent. So what you have is the ultimate question of combat. What wins? The man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times, or the man who has practiced 10,000 different kicks once? It's the classical artist versus the jazz improviser. Perfection versus adaptability. A battle of bodies, yes, but more importantly, a battle of minds. Their public personas could not have been more different. Kojiro was a star. He was the handsome, dashing swordsman who was welcomed in the castles of the great lords, the daimyo. He was sponsored. He was celebrated. He was the kind of warrior mothers wanted their daughters to marry. He was a champion of the establishment. Musashi, on the other hand, was a ghost, a boogeyman. His fame was notoriety. He was the unkempt ronin who destroyed the Yoshioka, the man who showed up late and fought with a stick. He was feared, not loved. He was admired for his skill, yes, but from a safe distance. He was the ultimate outsider, the disruptive force that the establishment couldn't control. He was the vagabond, the wild dog, while Kojiro was the prized, pedigreed falcon. And as the years went by, these two parallel legends grew. Two paths to the same destination, the title of the greatest swordsman in Japan. While Musashi was on his Mushashugyo, Fighting duels in muddy fields and dirty back alleys, collecting his 60-plus victories, Kojiro was on his own journey. But his was a more aristocratic tour. He served the powerful Hosokawa clan, acting as their chief weapons master. He traveled, he taught, he fought his own series of celebrated duels, his own undefeated record growing with each victory of his beautiful swallow cut. The entire nation of warriors began to buzz. It was like having two undefeated heavyweight champions in the world at the same time. The stories of Musashi's raw power and Kojiro's elegant skill spread through every province. It became inevitable. A question that hung in the air at every dojo, in every castle, in every tavern where warriors gathered. Who is better, the tiger of the wilderness or the dragon of the court? It was a showdown demanded by the times, a collision of destinies that had been building for years. But this was never going to be just a private duel between two men. The stakes were too high. The egos involved were too powerful. This became a matter of political pride. Kojiro was the champion of Lord Hosokawa Tadaoki, a powerful and influential daimyo. To have Kojiro defeat, Musashi would bring immense prestige to the Hosokawa clan. It would be a validation of their taste, their judgment, their power. On the other side, Musashi, while officially masterless, was a valuable commodity. Other lords, perhaps rivals of the Hosokawa, saw his potential. Sponsoring the man who could defeat Kojiro was a political power play. So the lords and their high-ranking retainers began to maneuver. They fanned the flames. They applied pressure. They turned a professional rivalry into a public spectacle. The duel was no longer just about discovering who the better swordsman was. It was a proxy war for the pride of powerful clans, a high-stakes game of political one-upmanship. These two men, these two titans of the sword, were being pushed onto a stage not entirely of their own making, for a final, inescapable confrontation that would define their legacies forever. The stage had to be perfect, not a polished dojo, not a lord's courtyard, something elemental, something final. They chose Ganryujima, a tiny slip of an island in the Kanman Straits, a place known for nothing. It was neutral ground, a sterile arena, stripped of all distractions. There would be no allies, no easy escape, no home field advantage. Just two men, the sand and the sea, an inescapable theater for the final act. The entire martial world of Japan held its breath, the dragon versus the tiger. A battle for the soul of the sword, scheduled for the hour of the dragon, 8 o'clock in the morning. A date with destiny. And so we return to that sun-drenched beach. Sasaki Kojiro, the dragon, the demon of the West, is waiting. He arrived early, a show of his punctuality, his respect for the code. He is a portrait of perfect readiness. But the hour of the dragon comes and goes. The sun begins its climb, getting hotter, the glare off the water more intense. And with every passing moment, Musashi is waging war. Not with a sword, but with time itself. He is attacking Kojiro's greatest strength, his perfectly composed mind. Kojiro's serene confidence begins to curdle into impatience, then into frustration, and finally into a hot, blinding rage. The officials are frantic. His supporters are furious. He's been publicly slighted, humiliated before the first blow is even struck. The duel hasn't even started, and Musashi is already winning. This delay, this infuriating, insulting delay, was a masterstroke. 2, maybe 3 hours late. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't because he overslept. It was a weapon. Musashi was dictating the terms of engagement. He was shattering the formal rhythm of the duel, replacing it with his own chaotic cadence. He was communicating in the clearest possible terms. Your rules do not apply to me. Your schedule does not apply to me. Your honor code does not apply to me. I am a force of nature, and the storm arrives when it damn well pleases. Imagine being Kojiro. You are the finest swordsman of your generation. You have prepared your mind and body for this single moment your entire life, and your opponent doesn't even grant you the basic courtesy of showing up on time. The fury must have been a physical poison, clouding his judgment, tightening his muscles, replacing the cold focus of a master with the hot rage of an insulted man. And what was Musashi doing during this delay? Meditating? Praying? No way. The legends say that on the boat ride over, he performed one of the most audacious and insulting acts in the history of single combat. He looked at the rough-hewn spare oar in the boat. He took out his short sword, his wakizashi, and as the fisherman rowed him slowly, deliberately, toward the fight of his life, he began to carve, shaving off splinters of wood, shaping the heavy oar into a crude, oversized wooden sword, a bokken. The scrape of steel on wood was the only sound. This wasn't frantic, last-minute improvisation. This was a calculated, theatrical act of supreme confidence. He was forging the instrument of his victory, on the way to the battle itself. The symbolism of that choice, wood against steel, is staggering. On one side you have Sasaki Kojiro, armed with his drying pole, a magnificent custom-forged blade, a work of art from a master smith, a named weapon that was famous throughout Japan. It was the pinnacle of technology and craftsmanship. On the other side, Musashi arrives with a piece of lumber, a boat oar. He was making the most profound statement possible without saying a word. He was saying, your legendary blade, the source of your fame, the focus of your life's work, it means nothing. Your art is so fragile that I can shatter it with this crude piece of wood. But it was also a brilliant tactical choice. The carved oar was longer than a normal sword, giving him a crucial advantage in reach against Kojiro's own notoriously long blade. It was heavier, capable of delivering bone-shattering blows. It was an ugly, brutal, pragmatic solution to a deadly tactical problem. And the strategy didn't end there. Musashi wasn't just fighting Kojiro, he was fighting the entire world. His deliberate delay meant that by the time he arrived, the sun was no longer overhead. It was in the east, climbing in the morning sky. As Musashi waded ashore from the boat, he made sure to position himself with his back to the sea, forcing Kojiro to face him, and to look directly into the blinding glare of the rising sun. A simple thing, a detail anyone else might have overlooked. But in a duel where victory and death are separated by milliseconds, having your opponent partially blinded is a monumental advantage. He even used the tide, arriving as it was coming in, ensuring his boatmen could wait in deeper water for a quick escape, knowing that the turning tide might complicate things for his opponent's party. He weaponized the sun, he weaponized the sea. The entire island was his accomplice. The battle itself, after years of build-up, hours of waiting, was over in a heartbeat. Kojiro, his mind a cauldron of rage, his vision hampered by the sun, sees his disheveled opponent wading ashore. He draws his magnificent blade, the one and only time he would ever draw it in a duel and not be victorious. And in his anger, he throws his scabbard into the sea, a gesture that says, I will not need this again. Musashi just smiles and says, you have already lost, Kojiro. The rage boils over. Kojiro attacks, unleashing his masterpiece, the mythical swallow cut. But Musashi is not surprised. He is not intimidated. His mind is a calm lake. He has anticipated this. He meets the attack, and with his longer, heavier wooden oar, he brings it crashing down on Kojiro's skull. A sickening crunch of wood against bone. As Kojiro falls, dying, his blade makes one final, ghostly cut, slicing through Musashi's robes and leaving a gash on his thigh. A final testament to how close it was, how deadly the dragon truly was. But it was not enough. One strike. The demon of the West was dead, his perfect technique shattered by a savage mind and a crude piece of wood. The aftermath was chaos. Victory, but not a clean one. Kojiro's supporters, powerful men from the Hosokawa clan, were screaming in outrage. It was a trick. He was late. That wasn't a real sword. He fought dishonorably. He used the sun. They couldn't process what had happened. Their perfect champion, their beautiful artist of death, had been bludgeoned to death like a common thug by a man who broke every rule. The accusations of foul play, of cowardice, began immediately. The controversy was as much a part of the event as the duel itself. Musashi didn't just win. He won in a way that was so unorthodox, so infuriating to the establishment, that they had to create stories to rationalize their hero's defeat. And this is how the myth was born. In the arguments and accusations that followed, the story of the duel on Ganryujima began to grow, to change, to become something more than a mere fight. Each retelling embellished the details. Musashi's genius became more profound, his planning more meticulous. Kojiro's arrogance became his tragic flaw. The carved oar transformed from a clever tactic into a symbol of Zen mastery, the formless defeating the formal. The duel became a parable, a lesson, a foundational story of Japanese culture. Was it a story about the victory of strategy over brute force? Or mind over matter? or the rebellious outsider triumphing over the corrupt establishment. It was all of those things. The man, Miyamoto Musashi, rode away from that island, but the legend, the immortal Kensei or Sword Saint, was born right there on that bloody patch of sand. So you've done it. You've climbed the mountain. You stand at the summit, alone. You've defeated every challenger, dismantled every rival, and your final, greatest opponent lies dead at your feet on a lonely beach. Your name is a legend whispered in every corner of the nation. You are, without question, the greatest swordsman alive. Now what? What do you do for an encore when the main event is over? This is the paradox of ultimate victory. For a man like Musashi, a man whose entire existence was defined by the test of the duel, his very success became a kind of prison. His fame was a cage. Who would dare challenge him now? Ambitious young fools, maybe, looking for a quick death and a footnote in his story. But a true master? Another Kojiro? Never. The risk was absolute. The chance of victory, 0. He had become too good, too feared. The man who lived for the fight could no longer find one worthy of his time. And in that silence, in that eerie peace at the top of the world, a profound and lonely isolation must have set in. And so, sometime after Ganryujima, in his early 30s, Miyamoto Musashi makes a conscious decision. He puts the sword away. Not literally, he would never be without it, but he puts away the idea of the sword as a tool for dueling. The Musashi, the warrior's pilgrimage that had defined his entire adult life, was over. He had proven his point 60 times over. The external war was won. He had dominated the world of men. But what about the internal world? What about the rage that drove the boy Benosuke? What about the trauma of Sekigahara? What about the ghosts of the men he had killed? Perhaps he realized, in the quiet aftermath of his victory over Kojiro, that the only opponent left who was worthy of his attention was himself. The path of the sword was about to take a sharp, inward turn, so he does the one thing you'd never expect. He tries to settle down. He tries to join the system he had spent his life raging against. He accepts a position of service, becoming a retainer to the powerful lord, Ogasawara Tadazane. Can you even picture it? Miyamoto Musashi, the untamed demon of Kyoto, sitting through tedious court meetings, practicing the rigid, mind-numbing etiquette of a samurai household. This was a man who operated on instinct and brutal pragmatism, now thrust into a world of subtle politics, social hierarchy, and formal rituals. He must have been a caged tiger, pacing the confines of a life he wasn't built for. Respected, without a doubt. Feared, absolutely. But understood? Likely not. He was their living legend, their ultimate weapon, but he was also their awkward, antisocial houseguest, who probably terrified the other retainers. It was his attempt at a normal life, and it likely only served to remind him and everyone around him of how profoundly abnormal he truly was. And in this new life, he tries to build something that lasts beyond his own reputation, a legacy, a family. He adopts a son, Miyamoto Mikinosuke. He takes this young man, a promising samurai in the service of another lord, and tries to mold him, to pass on some part of himself. But the world of Bushido has its own brutal logic. Mikinosuke's lord dies, and according to the strictest, most traditional interpretation of the warrior's code, a loyal retainer should follow his master into death. So Mikinosuke commits seppuku, ritual suicide. Think of the devastating irony for Musashi, the man who lived his entire life by a code of absolute self-reliance, who believed in victory and survival above all else, who saw traditional honor as a fool's game. His own son dies by sacrificing himself for a dead man, for a rule. It must have been a gut punch, a tragic, heartbreaking confirmation that his philosophy was his and his alone, an island in the vast ocean of tradition that had just swallowed his son whole. After this tragedy, he could have sworn off the idea of family, of legacy, forever. But he tries again. He adopts another boy, a relative named Iori. And maybe he learned something from the tragedy of Mikinosuke, because his approach with Iori seems different. He doesn't just adopt him. He mentors him. He guides him. And Iori doesn't follow the path of a doomed idealist. He becomes a stunning success. He rises through the ranks of the Ogasawara clan, not just as a swordsman, but as an administrator, a captain, a trusted and high-ranking official. He thrives in the very system that Musashi always held at arm's length. Iori's success is a different kind of victory for Musashi. It shows that the old master's teachings on strategy and self-reliance could be adapted to success not just in a death match, but in life, in a career, in the complex world of men. Iori became the living, breathing proof that Musashi's way was more than just a path to killing. Decades pass. Musashi is now an old man, his hair gray, his dueling days a distant memory. And then, one last time, the drums of war beat for him. The Shimabara Rebellion of 1637, a massive uprising of peasants, mostly Christian converts, against the brutal oppression of the shogunate. It's the last major battle on Japanese soil for over 200 years. The Ogasawara clan is called to help crush the rebellion at their final stronghold, Hara Castle. And Musashi goes with them. But he's not the wild-eyed warrior of his youth. He's in his 50s. He is there as a gunbai, a military advisor, a strategist on his adopted son Iori's staff. It's the perfect bookend to his life. At Sekigahara, he was a nameless teenager, swallowed by the chaos. At Hara Castle, he is the revered old master, observing the grand sweep of strategy from a commander's perch. There's a famous and perhaps humbling story that during the siege, the great Miyamoto Musashi was unceremoniously knocked from his horse by a rock thrown from the castle walls by a peasant rebel. A funny, poignant reminder that even for the greatest swordsman in history, the nature of war had changed. It was no longer about the single heroic combatant. And in the long, peaceful years that followed this final taste of war, Musashi's transformation becomes complete. He delves deeper into the things he had no time for as a young man on the run: Zen Buddhism, meditation, the arts. He begins a profound search for stillness. He starts to explore the concept of the life-giving sword, the Katsujinken, as opposed to the killing sword, the Satsujinken, which he had already mastered. The idea is that the ultimate level of mastery is not the ability to take life, but the ability to preserve it. Not through fighting, but through a perfection of spirit and perception that makes fighting unnecessary. The principles of timing, rhythm, and focus that he had used to kill men, he now applies to a new set of disciplines. The sword is no longer a weapon to be used on others, but a tool for forging his own spirit. The ultimate warrior was finally, truly, turning his blade inward. A man who spends his entire life as a lone wolf, a renegade who spits on the very idea of established schools, doesn't usually start a school. But Musashi was a living contradiction. In his later years, the ultimate outsider decided to become an insider, to codify the uncodifiable. He founded the Niten Ichiryu, the school of two heavens as one. Think about the sheer audacity. After dismantling the Yoshioka Ryu, after proving the fallibility of every famous style he encountered, he creates his own. But this couldn't be a normal dojo. There would be no mindless repetition of forms, no drilling of choreographed dances of death. A school founded by Musashi would have to be a school of strategy, a school of perception, a school of chaos. It would be less about teaching you how to fight and more about teaching you how to win. A subtle but profound difference. So what would it have been like? To take a lesson with the demon himself? Terrifying. Utterly mind-breakingly terrifying. Forget the serene, patient sensei you see in movies. Musashi would have been an eccentric, unpredictable, and brutally demanding teacher. You'd be standing there, trying to practice a stance, and he'd suddenly whack you with a wooden sword from behind just to teach you about awareness. He wouldn't give you answers, he'd give you riddles. He'd say things like, "The way of my strategy is to see the distant as near and the near as distant. What do you do with that?" He'd tell you, "You must look at your opponent's spirit, not his sword." It would have been infuriating. It would have felt like learning physics from a Zen master. There were no easy steps, no 10-point lesson plan. He would force you into unwinnable scenarios, overwhelm you, break you down, all in an effort to shatter your reliance on conventional thinking. A lesson with Musashi wasn't about learning a set of moves. It was about surviving a psychological assault until you had a moment of pure, blinding insight. It was a baptism by fire, and who was meant to carry this fire into the future? The primary heir was his adopted son, Miyamoto Iori, but Iori carried a heavy, complicated burden. He was the son of a legend, the child of the ultimate anti-establishment icon. But Iori himself was a success within the establishment. He was a high-ranking captain, a respected administrator, a man who understood politics and propriety. How do you reconcile that? Being the heir to a philosophy of radical self-reliance while also being a company man, Iori represented the practical, worldly application of Musashi's teachings. He proved that his father's strategies for victory could be used to build a successful career, to manage men, to navigate the complexities of society. He was the public face of the legacy, the son who carried the famous name and anchored it in the real world. But one has to wonder, did he carry the wild, untamed heart of the philosophy, or just its practical shell? Because there was another student, a man named Terao Maganocho. He was not the famous son, not the high-ranking heir. He was the faithful scribe, the dedicated disciple. And it was to Maganojo, not Iori, that Musashi would entrust his most precious possession, the finished manuscript of his life's work, the Book of Five Rings. Why? Why give the secret teachings not to the son, but to the student? Perhaps Musashi understood the difference between his two successors. Iori was the legacy of his worldly success. But Maganojo was the legacy of his spirit. He was the one who could grasp the deeper philosophical currents beneath the surface of the techniques. He was the scholar, the one who could truly understand the words on the page. In this, Musashi created two lines of succession, a public, worldly line through his son, and a secret, spiritual line through his most trusted student, ensuring that both the practical and the profound aspects of his way would survive. And what was the core of that way? What was the secret lesson he was so desperate to pass on? It was the concept of rhythm, universal rhythm. Musashi taught that the timing you use to defeat a man with a sword is the same timing a carpenter uses to drive a nail, the same timing a general uses to launch an attack, the same timing a merchant uses to close a deal. He believed there was an underlying cadence to all things, a universal pulse. Most people are out of rhythm. They hesitate, they rush, they are tone-deaf to the music of the moment. Musashi's teaching was about attuning your spirit to this rhythm. Once you felt it, once you could perceive the cadence of your opponent's intentions, the flow of a battle, the rise and fall of an opportunity, victory was a matter of course. This is what elevated his school from a simple martial art to a grand philosophy of life. He wasn't teaching swordsmanship. He was teaching a way to perceive the hidden structure of reality. And that legacy, entrusted to men like Maganojo, survived. It is, frankly, a miracle. In a world where schools and clans rose and fell, where teachings were lost to fire and war, Musashi's Niten Ichiryu endured. It was passed down, from teacher to student, in an unbroken chain, a direct transmission of knowledge stretching across 4 centuries. His ideas weren't just written in a book, they were kept alive in flesh and blood, in the stance of a student, in the grip on a sword, in the timing of a cut. Today there are still swordsmen, in Japan and across the world, who practice the art that he created. They are the living inheritors of his spirit. His final greatest victory wasn't on a battlefield or a beach. It was in the fact that he, the ultimate lone wolf, managed to create something that would outlive him, a family of the sword bound together by the teachings of the master who walked his own path, alone. The ultimate proof of Musashi's genius, the thing that elevates him from a mere warrior to a true master, is his final philosophical breakthrough: the way is in all things. Think about that. For him, the universe wasn't divided into neat little categories like fighting, painting, writing, and sculpting. It was all one thing. The same fundamental principles of timing, rhythm, balance, and focus that allowed him to kill a man with a sword were the exact same principles he used to paint a bird on a branch with a brush. There was no difference. A sword stroke, a brush stroke. Both were expressions of a spirit in harmony with the rhythm of the universe. This is his grand, unified theory of mastery. Once you understand the way in one thing, you understand it in everything. The sword was just the tool he used to first grasp it. The brush would be the tool he used to prove it. And where does this final act of his life take place? In one of history's most beautiful and poignant ironies, he finds his final patron in the Hosokawa clan. Yes, the very same clan that had sponsored his greatest rival, Sasaki Kojiro. Decades after the duel at Ganryujima, the new lord, Hosokawa Tadatoshi, invites the aging Musashi to his castle in Kumamoto, not as a retainer, Not as a sword instructor, but as a guest of honor. A living treasure, imagine that. The family of the man he killed, the establishment he once fought, now welcomes him with open arms, giving him the one thing he'd never truly had: peace. They gave him a quiet place to live, a stipend to support him, and the freedom to finally lay down the burdens of his past and pursue the passions of his mind. The ultimate outsider was finally, truly, brought in from the cold. And what does he do with this newfound peace? He creates art. But the art of Musashi is not what you'd expect. This is not the refined, colorful, delicate work that was popular in the grand courts of his day. No, his art is exactly like his swordsmanship. It is raw, direct, stripped down to its essential core. There is no wasted motion. He worked almost exclusively in monochrome inkwash painting sumi-e, just black ink, water, paper, and the spirit of the artist. Each brushstroke is like a sword cut. It is made with absolute confidence, and it is irreversible. There is no hesitation. There is no going back to fix a mistake. His paintings are brutal in their honesty and breathtaking in their simplicity. They are a direct transmission of his spirit onto the page. Look at his most famous work, the one that perfectly encapsulates his entire philosophy, Shrike on a Dead Branch. It is devastatingly simple. A gnarled, leafless, dead branch cuts across the frame, and perched on it is a single, small bird, a shrike. A shrike is not a gentle songbird. It's a predator, a hunter, sometimes called the butcher bird, for its habit of impaling its prey on thorns. In the painting, the shrike is coiled energy. It is utterly still, yet brimming with potential. Its eye is fixed on something outside the frame, a beetle perhaps. And, you just know that it is in the last moment of stillness, before an explosive, lethal strike. The painting is mostly empty space, the void. The dead branch is the harsh reality of existence, and the shrike is the master of that reality. It is a self-portrait. It is Musashi. It is the perfect embodiment of a warrior's spirit. Absolute calm, total awareness, and the readiness to act with decisive finality. Or consider another masterpiece, his Wild Geese in Reeds. Again, it's just ink on paper. A flock of wild geese is depicted in flight, but they are partially obscured by a screen of chaotic, vertical strokes representing reeds. You can't see any single goose perfectly. You just get a sense of them, a feeling of their movement, a glimpse of their form through the confusion of the foreground. What is he painting here? Not geese. He is painting the act of perception. He's showing you what it's like to see clearly in a confusing world. In a duel, you are bombarded with information. The flash of the sword, the movement of the feet, the shifting of the body. A novice tries to see it all and sees nothing. A master learns to see through the noise, to perceive the essential truth of his opponent's intention. This painting isn't about birds. It's a training manual for the eyes and the mind. And then there is his calligraphy, his shodo. In the samurai world, a man's handwriting was considered a direct reflection of his character, and Musashi's calligraphy is pure power. It is not elegant or graceful. It is thick, strong, and seems to burst from the page. Each character is executed with the same unhesitating force as a killing blow. The act itself is a discipline. Grinding the ink stick in the stone, loading the brush, focusing the mind until it is completely empty, and then unleashing that focused energy onto the paper in a single, fluid moment. It's the same mental state required to draw a sword and cut down an opponent. No difference. The sword and the brush were just different outlets for the same internal state of being. He didn't stop with paper and ink. He was a craftsman. He created sculptures, small works in wood and metal. These okimono are less famous, but they show the breadth of his skill. He understood the nature of materials. He knew the soul of wood, the spirit of metal. The same hands that could carve a boat oar into a deadly weapon on the way to a duel could also carve a piece of wood into a delicate representation of a god or a sage. This wasn't a hobby. It was part of his unified vision. To be a master of the sword, you had to understand the world, and to understand the world, you had to be able to shape it with your hands. He was not just a warrior philosopher. He was a warrior philosopher artist craftsman. And what is the unifying principle behind all of it? His sword, his brush, his sculpture, his writing? It is the aesthetic of the void. Ku. This is the central pillar of his entire universe. For Musashi, the void is not empty nothingness. It is the state of infinite potential. It is the silence from which all sound is born. The empty space in his paintings is not just background. It is the void, the most important part of the composition. A mind that is free from fear, doubt, and calculation is a mind that has entered the void. And from that state of pure potential, the perfect, spontaneous, and correct action, whether it's a sword cut or a brushstroke, arises naturally, without conscious thought. All of his art, all of his life's work, was a pointer, a signpost, directing you to this one, ultimate reality. The sword and the brush were two doors into the same room, the silent, empty, and all-powerful room of the void. The end is coming. The body, which has survived more than 60 duels, the chaos of battlefields, and a lifetime on the hard road, is finally beginning to fail. Musashi knows his time is short. And there is one last thing he must do. He has lived his philosophy, he has taught it to a select few, but he has not yet written it down for eternity. So he leaves the comfort and warmth of Lord Hosokawa's castle, he walks away from society one last time, and he retreats to a cave, the Raigondo, the Spirit Rock Cave, a cold, damp fissure in the side of a mountain. Think about this. For his final act, he strips away everything. Comfort, companionship, distraction. He returns to the elemental world of his youth, surrounded only by rock and moss and the sound of dripping water. He is there to face his final opponent, mortality. And in this self-imposed tomb, with a brush and ink, he will write his soul onto the page. He will forge his last and greatest weapon, a book. Go Rin no Sho, the Book of 5 Rings. He begins with the foundation, the Book of Earth. And this is pure Musashi, brutally practical. He tells you right away, this is the way for men who want to win. No poetry, no mysticism, not yet. The Earth Scroll is about the basics. It's the boring stuff. It's the stuff that arrogant fools skip over. Your stance, your grip, how to hold the sword, how to move your feet. He compares strategy to being a master carpenter. A carpenter must know his tools. He must sharpen them. He must understand the grain of the wood. You cannot build a towering temple on a rotten foundation. This is the boot camp, the endless scales a concert pianist has to play. It's the grunt work. Musashi is screaming at you from across 4 centuries. Do not neglect the fundamentals. Master the simple things so completely that they become a part of your body, an extension of your will, as natural as breathing. Only then can you even begin to walk the path. Once the foundation is unshakable, you can learn to flow. The Book of Water. Here, the philosophy deepens. He writes that your spirit must become like water. Water has no fixed shape. It can be a gentle stream or a raging tsunami. It fills any vessel, it finds any crack. It can wear away the hardest stone. So too must be your mind, your body, your technique. Do not be rigid. Do not cling to one best way of doing things. The man who only knows one stance, or one favorite attack, is a dead man. You must be fluid, adaptable, able to change your approach in an instant based on the terrain, the weapon, the opponent. In this scroll, he details the actual physical techniques, the 5 primary stances, the 5 basic cuts. But he stresses that these are not a rigid system. They are just forms, like vessels for water. The goal is to master them so you are no longer bound by them. The goal is to become formless. Now the heat of battle, the Book of Fire. This scroll is pure combat psychology. It is a terrifying glimpse into the mind of a master predator. This is where he discusses timing, initiative, and the art of breaking your opponent's spirit before you break his body. Fire is about the moment of conflict. It's about seizing the advantage and never letting it go. He details his strategies, and they are brutal. Treading on the sword. Pressing your attack so relentlessly, your opponent has no room to even use his own weapon. To cause confusion. Feinting, screaming, creating distractions to shatter your opponent's calm. To rattle the enemy, attacking their weak points, their fears, their habits. This isn't about elegant swordplay. This is about getting inside the other man's head, finding the cracks in his composure, and pouring gasoline on them until his mind collapses in panic and chaos. The Book of Fire is a manual on how to win the fight before the first blow even lands. Then comes the intelligence briefing. The Book of Wind. The wind blows everywhere. It carries sounds and scents. It tells you what is happening elsewhere. This scroll is about knowing your enemy. In it, Musashi ruthlessly analyzes all the other famous sword schools of his time. This is him, the ultimate outsider, critiquing the establishment. He dissects their weaknesses. This school is too obsessed with using an overly long sword. This one has footwork that is showy but impractical. This one is too focused on a single set of kata and is therefore predictable. It is a masterclass in competitive analysis. He isn't just saying, "I am better." He is saying, "Here is why I am better, and here is why they will lose." His message is universal. To truly master your own craft, you must understand the ways of others. You must know their playbooks, their habits, their cherished beliefs, especially their cherished beliefs, because that is where their greatest weaknesses lie. And finally, the summit, the last scroll, the Book of the Void. This is where Musashi leaves the physical world behind and enters the realm of pure philosophy. After all the technique, all the strategy, all the psychology, the final step is to forget it all. The Void Coup is not nothingness. It is the state of mind where there is no confusion, no doubt, no ego. It is the mind of no mind. It is what a modern athlete calls being in the zone. It's that state of grace where your body acts perfectly, spontaneously, without any conscious thought. You've practiced the fundamentals so much they are in your bones. You've mastered strategy so well it's pure instinct. Now you must empty your mind of all that. You must become a vessel, a clear mirror, that simply reflects reality and acts. The ultimate attainment in the way of the warrior is to cease to be a warrior and to become the way itself. In the end, that small book, written by a dying man in a cold cave, is his ultimate victory, because the Book of Five Rings is not really about sword fighting. That's just the language he used. It's a book about strategy. It's a book about mastery. It is a timeless, universal guide to achieving success in any endeavor. Take his principles, apply them to business, to art, to science, to your own life. Know your fundamentals, earth. Be adaptable, water. Seize the initiative, fire. Know your competition, wind. And act from a state of clear, uncluttered focus, void. That is the final lesson. The sword was just the beginning. The real gift he left the world was a strategy, not just for battle, but for life. In 1645, in that cold cave, the brush finally slipped from Miyamoto Musashi's hand. The man died, but the Kensei, the sword saint, was just being born. Death is not an end for men like Musashi. It is a promotion. It frees them from the messy, inconvenient facts of their actual lives and allows them to become a story. And the story of Musashi began to grow the moment his heart stopped beating. The echo of his sword became a thunderclap that rolled down through the centuries. His 60 duels became 60 epic poems. His opponents grew more monstrous with each retelling. His unorthodox tactics were no longer seen as pragmatic or even dishonorable, but as signs of a transcendent, Zen-like genius. The man was gone. The symbol was just getting started, and here you have the great divide, the man versus the myth. The historical Musashi was a terrifying force of nature, a survivor, a killer, a man who won by any means necessary, showing up late, using an oversized piece of wood, attacking his opponent's mind with insults, killing a child to shatter the morale of an army. He was a product of a brutal, violent age, the mythical Musashi. He's different. He's a wandering philosopher. His journey isn't just a string of duels. It's a noble quest for enlightenment. His rough edges are sanded smooth. His brutal victories are reframed as profound lessons. The myth takes the raw, dangerous animal and turns him into a role model, a secular saint of self-improvement. And you have to ask yourself, which one is more important? The flawed, complicated man who actually lived, or the perfect, inspiring legend that has captivated the world for centuries? The single most powerful engine of that legend was a book. Not his book, but a novel written 300 years after his death. In the 1930s, a writer named Eiji Yoshikawa serialized his masterpiece, Musashi, and this book, This book is to Miyamoto Musashi what the Gospels are to Jesus. It is a massive, sprawling, epic adventure that took the historical skeleton of Musashi's life and wrapped it in the flesh of a modern hero's journey. It introduced characters and subplots that were pure fiction, like the beautiful Otsu, the love of his life, or the wise monk Takuan, who becomes his spiritual mentor. Yoshikawa's novel transformed Musashi from a fearsome duelist into an everyman hero on a quest to tame his own violent nature and find the true meaning of the sword. It is this version, the romantic, striving, deeply human Musashi, that would conquer the world. And then, that novel was given a face, a body, a voice. In the 1950s, the great Japanese film director Hiroshi Inagaki adapted Yoshikawa's novel into the Samurai Trilogy, and he cast the most electrifying actor of his generation, the force of nature, known as Toshiro Mifune, as Musashi. For millions of people around the globe who saw those films, Mifune's face is Musashi's face. His raw, explosive, almost feral energy became the physical embodiment of the character. The films were a global phenomenon. They won an Academy Award. They cemented the image of the wandering samurai hero, the lonely figure walking a dusty road, straw hat pulled low, hand resting on his sword, in the international consciousness. The myth, born in folklore and perfected in a novel, was now an immortal icon of the silver screen. But the legend doesn't just get repeated, it gets re-examined. It gets deconstructed. Fast forward to the modern era, to the late 20th and early 21st century. A manga artist named Takeko Inoue begins his own epic retelling, a series called Vagabond. And this is Musashi for a new, more cynical, more introspective age. Inoue, with his breathtakingly beautiful and brutally realistic artwork, peels back the layers of romanticism. His Musashi is not a confident hero. He is a tormented young man, haunted by the violence he commits, terrified of his own potential, desperately searching not just for victory, but for meaning. Vagabond brings the darkness back. It explores the psychological cost of the path of the sword. It shows that the legend is not a static monument, but a living story that every generation must grapple with, reinterpret, and make their own. Yet, beyond the stories, the real-world legacy of his blade lives on. His ideas are not just confined to the pages of books or the frames of a film. They are alive in every kendo dojo in the world. The practice of fighting with two swords, one long and one short, the Nito-ryu, is still a part of modern kendo, a direct, living link to the school he founded. Core concepts of kendo, like zanshin, the idea of maintaining a state of constant lingering awareness even after a strike is delivered, are pure Musashi. His philosophy, his emphasis on spirit over technique, his belief in the single, decisive blow, these ideas are woven into the very fabric of modern Japanese swordsmanship. His ghost is a permanent resident in the world of the blade. But the strangest chapter of his immortality, the one he could never have predicted, happened in the West. In the 1970s and 80s, his Book of Five Rings was translated into English and, improbably, it became a massive bestseller in the business world. As Western corporations found themselves in a fierce economic war with a rising Japan, executives were desperate to understand the samurai mindset. They picked up Musashi's book and saw not a guide to sword fighting, but a ruthless manual for corporate strategy. Suddenly, Wall Street traders and Silicon Valley CEOs were quoting a 17th century swordsman. Cause confusion in your enemy. Know the rhythm of your competitor. Attack their weak points. His strategies for dueling were reimagined as strategies for hostile takeovers and marketing campaigns. The ultimate warrior's ghost now haunts the boardrooms of global capitalism, a final, bizarre testament to the universal and timeless power of his strategic mind. Just before the end, in that cold cave in the mountains of Higo, after he had poured his life's strategic knowledge into the Book of Five Rings, Miyamoto Musashi picked up his brush one last time. He was not writing for posterity. He was not writing for the aspiring warrior or the ambitious CEO. He was writing for his most dedicated student, Terao Maganoho. And he wrote a short, sharp, shockingly austere list of 21 precepts, a personal code. He called it the Dokodo, the way of walking alone. This wasn't a book of strategy. This was a map of his soul, his final will and testament, not of his possessions but of his spirit. The 21 Diamonds of Wisdom, mined from a life of conflict and solitude. And what is the first lesson from the man who conquered the world? Let it all go. So many of the precepts in the Dokodo are a ruthless guide to detachment. Accept everything just the way it is. Do not regret what you have done. Never be jealous. Do not hold on to possessions you no longer need. Do not act following customary beliefs. This is a man systematically severing every cord of attachment that ties a person to the world of suffering. He who had known fame, who had served lords, who had faced death and glory, concluded that the path to true strength was to want nothing, to regret nothing, and to fear nothing. It's a brutal, stoic philosophy, forged in the heat of 100 battles. To be truly free, to be truly invincible, you must arrive at a point where the world can offer you nothing you want and take nothing from you that you are afraid to lose. And this detachment leads to the second great pillar of his final teaching, absolute, uncompromising self-reliance. This is the heart of the Dokodo. This is the way of walking alone. Precept number 4. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. A call to humility and deep observation. Precept 19. Respect Buddha and the gods without counting on their help. Can you feel the power in that statement? It is the ultimate declaration of spiritual independence. He is not an atheist. He acknowledges the divine. He advises respect. But dependence? Never. Do not pray for victory. Do not pray for deliverance. Your hands, your mind, your spirit. These are the only tools you can rely on. And the final, chilling precept, number 21. Never stray from the way. It's a final command to himself and to his student. Once you find this path of radical self-reliance, you must never, ever leave it. And so this is the final lesson. The last secret from the Sword Saint. His entire life was a journey toward this point. The Book of 5 Rings is the manual that teaches you how to conquer your opponents. The Dokodo is the manual that teaches you how to conquer yourself. One is a guide to mastering the world of conflict and strategy. The other is a guide to mastering the self, to achieving a state of inner stillness so profound that the chaos of the world can no longer touch you. He walked a path of violence to find a deep and abiding peace. He became the most famous man in Japan to learn the wisdom of anonymity. And his final advice, the distilled wisdom of a life spent in the crucible, is perhaps the hardest path of all. To walk alone. To be a law unto yourself. To be free from desire, free from regret, free from fear, and to face the world and your own mortality with nothing but the strength of your own spirit. That was the way. The way of the man who mastered the sword, only to discover in the end that the ultimate purpose of the blade was to carve away everything that was not essential.